The massive space station, called Consensus Prime, floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than most moons, and served as the meeting place for the most important beings in the galaxy. Today, like every month for the past 300 years, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered in the Great Council Chamber. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the long corridors toward the meeting hall. Her footsteps echoed on the metal floor as she passed towering aliens who barely looked at her. Some had multiple arms, others floated in the air, and a few glowed with strange lights. But all of them shared one thing. They looked at Elena like she was nothing special. Elena represented Earth and all of humanity. She was 45 years old, had gray streaks in her black hair, and wore a simple blue uniform. Compared to the elaborate robes and strange body modifications of the other ambassadors, she looked plain. That was exactly how the Galactic Council wanted it. The council chamber was enormous. Thousands of seats rose up in circles around a central speaking area. The most important species sat in the front rows on golden platforms. The Seraphim occupied the largest section. They looked like tall, thin people made of living crystal. Light moved through their bodies in patterns that showed their emotions. They had ruled their part of the galaxy for over 10,000 years, and had never lost a single war. Next to them sat the Korthak Collective. They used to be biological creatures, but now they were more machine than flesh. Metal and wires covered most of their bodies. They shared thoughts through computer networks, and could think faster than any other species. They built technology that seemed like magic to most others. The third major power was the Ethereal Dominion. They looked almost human, but their skin was pale blue, and their eyes were solid white. They could read minds and control thoughts. They believed they were the most evolved species in the galaxy, and treated everyone else like children. Elena's seat was in the back row, far from the center. The human delegation booth was small and cramped. A sign in front of it read, "Earth, Minor Species Classification." Elena sat down and activated her recording device. Whatever happened today, Earth's government would know about it. The session began when High Counselor Zethkari rose from his crystal throne. Light pulsed through his body in deep blue waves that meant he was serious. His voice echoed through the chamber, without any need for speakers. The Seraphim could make sound appear anywhere they wanted. "Fellow counselors," he said, "we face a new threat from beyond our galaxy. Our sensors have detected massive ships approaching from the void between galaxies. They have attacked 3 outer colonies and left nothing behind." A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed grainy images of huge black ships that looked like they were made of twisted metal and bone. The ships moved in swarms, surrounding and destroying everything in their path. "The Void Swarm," continued Zethkari, "appears to be unlike any enemy we have faced. They do not respond to communication. They do not take prisoners. They simply consume everything and move on." Counselor Crix of the Korthak Collective spoke next. His voice was mechanical and emotionless. "Our analysis shows the swarm uses adaptive technology. They learn from each battle and improve their methods. However, their technology is crude compared to our own. With proper planning, they can be defeated." The ethereal representative, Lysandra, floated slightly above her seat. Her mental voice reached into everyone's mind at once. "My people have tried to read their thoughts. Their minds are alien, hostile. They think only of growth and consumption. But they are not intelligent enough to threaten truly advanced species." For 3 hours, the major species discussed their plans. The Seraphim wanted to use their massive war fleets to crush the swarm in one great battle. The Korthak suggested building automated defense networks that would stop the invaders at the galaxy's edge. The Ethereals proposed using their mental powers to confuse and control the swarm ships. Elena listened to all of this and took careful notes. Earth had been studying the swarm reports for months. Human analysts had found patterns that the alien species seemed to be missing. The swarm was not just randomly attacking. They were testing defenses and learning from each encounter. When the formal presentations ended, Zethkari asked if any minor species had input. This was tradition, but usually no one spoke up. Today, Elena stood and pressed the button to request speaking time. A quiet murmur went through the chamber. Many aliens turned to look at the human section with surprise. The request appeared on the main display. Earth delegation requests floor time. Zethkari's light patterns showed annoyance. The representative from Earth wishes to contribute to this discussion? Elena walked down to the central speaking area. Her footsteps seemed very loud in the sudden silence. She stood in the same place where the galaxy's greatest leaders had made history for thousands of years. Honored counselors, she began, humanity has reviewed all available data on the Void Swarm. We believe there are important factors that have not been considered. She activated a small device that projected her own hologram. It showed movement patterns of the swarm attacks. The swarm is not attacking randomly. They are systematically testing different types of defenses. Each attack teaches them something new. They are learning how we fight. This is obvious, interrupted Crix. We have already accounted for their adaptive capabilities. With respect, Elena continued, I don't think you have. The swarm destroyed a Zeraphim outpost last week. They used tactics specifically designed to counter crystal-based technology. They had never encountered Zeraphim forces before that battle. Zethkari's light flashed red with irritation. Are you suggesting that the greatest military minds in the galaxy have overlooked something that humans discovered? I'm suggesting that sometimes it helps to look at problems from a different angle, Elena replied. Earth proposes a coordinated defense strategy that uses multiple species working together. Each species covers the weaknesses of the others. The chamber erupted in what passed for laughter among aliens. Some species made sounds like grinding metal. Others flashed lights in patterns that meant amusement. The ethereal's mental laughter felt like ice in Elena's mind. Lysandra spoke for all of them. How refreshing. The newest species thinks they can teach their elders about warfare. Perhaps humanity should focus on learning basic civilization before offering strategic advice to their superiors. Elena felt her face flush red, but she kept her voice steady. We're offering to help. Help? Zethkari's light pulsed with what looked like genuine surprise. Earth has been part of this council for 3 centuries. In that time, what have humans accomplished? Your technology is primitive. Your military tactics are barbaric. You fight wars against your own species with simple metal projectiles. You think in terms of decades, while we plan for millennia. Your greatest achievement, added Crix, is barely managing not to destroy your own planet. Why would ancient civilizations need advice from a species that discovered space travel yesterday? The session continued for another hour, but Elena was not allowed to speak again. Every human proposal was rejected without discussion. When she tried to present detailed analysis of swarm behavioral patterns, the council voted to move to other business. As the meeting ended, Elena gathered her materials and walked back to the human quarters. Behind her, she could hear aliens discussing the amusing human presentation and wondering why Earth was even allowed in the council. That night, Elena sat in her small office and composed a message to Earth. It was short and used phrases that would mean nothing to anyone intercepting it. But Earth's leaders would understand perfectly. Weather patterns unchanged, local authorities uninterested in storm warnings. Recommend activating emergency protocols. Suggest immediate family consultation regarding future housing arrangements. She encrypted the message and sent it through the quantum communication array. Then, she began packing her personal belongings. Something told her she would not be returning to Consensus Prime anytime soon. The next day brought another council session. Elena arrived early and sat in her assigned seat, watching as the chamber filled with alien representatives. Today's agenda focused on military preparations for the Void Swarm threat. Each major species would present their defensive plans. Elena had spent the night reviewing Earth's intelligence files. Human spies and diplomats had been gathering information about alien military capabilities for decades. What they had learned was troubling. The major species were powerful, but they were also overconfident. They relied too much on their past successes and ancient technologies. The Seraphim went first. High Counselor Zethkari created a massive holographic display showing their crystal warships. The vessels were beautiful, with flowing lines and surfaces that reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. Each ship was a work of art as much as a weapon. "Behold the Eternal Fleet," Zethkari announced proudly. "For 10,000 years, these ships have brought order to the galaxy. The Void Swarm will learn what countless other enemies have discovered. Crystal technology cannot be defeated." The display showed battle formations that looked like flowers blooming in space. The ships moved in perfect harmony, each one supporting the others. Their weapons fired beams of concentrated light that could cut through planets. Counselor Crix presented next. The Korthak fleet appeared on the display as geometric shapes covered in weapons. Unlike the artistic Seraphim ships, these vessels were purely functional. Every surface had a purpose. Every angle was calculated for maximum efficiency. "The collective ships are designed through perfect mathematical principles," Crix explained. "Our artificial intelligence networks can predict enemy movements before they happen. Our weapon systems can fire 16,000 rounds per second with perfect accuracy. The swarm's chaotic nature will be countered by our absolute order." When the ethereal dominion's turn came, Lysandra did not use a hologram. Instead, she sent images directly into everyone's mind. Elena saw ships that seemed to be made of pure energy, crewed by beings who could kill with a thought. "Physical weapons are for primitive species," Lysandra's mental voice carried obvious superiority. "The Dominion fights with the power of consciousness itself. We will dominate the swarm's minds and turn their own ships against them." Smaller species presented their plans as well. The Aquatic Federation showed underwater cities that could hide entire fleets. The Silicon Collective presented robotic armies that felt no fear or pain. Each species had weapons and tactics that had made them successful for centuries. Then came time for questions and suggestions. Elena had prepared a detailed presentation about human military analysis. She had data showing how Earth's defensive theories could work with alien technology to create something stronger than any single species could build. She raised her hand and waited for recognition. Zethkari noticed her signal, and his light patterns showed amusement. "The human representative wishes to speak again? How persistent." Elena walked to the central platform once more. The chamber was not silent this time. She could hear chittering, buzzing, and electronic sounds that meant various species were talking among themselves. None of them were paying attention to her. "Honored counselors," Elena began, "humanity has studied all the presentations today. We see great strength in each species' military capabilities, but we also see potential problems." She activated her holographic display. It showed tactical simulations that human computers had been running for weeks. "The Seraphim's crystal ships are powerful, but they use energy frequencies that can be predicted and countered. The Korthak's mathematical precision works well against logical enemies, but the swarm appears to use chaos as a weapon. The ethereal's mental attacks require minds that work like yours. The swarm might think in ways you cannot understand." "Enough," interrupted Zethkari. His light flashed angry red. "This is absurd. You dare criticize technologies that have conquered the galaxy?" Elena pressed on. "I'm not criticizing. I'm suggesting that each species' strength could cover another species' weakness." Human tactical doctrine emphasizes adaptability and redundancy. If we combine, Crick's mechanical voice cut through her words. Human tactical doctrine? You mean the species that spent most of its history killing its own kind? The same humans who use simple projectile weapons in the age of energy beams? Perhaps, suggested Lysandra with mental mockery, humans could share their expertise in primitive violence. After all, they have had so much practice fighting each other. The chamber erupted in alien laughter again. Elena felt her face burning with embarrassment and anger, but she forced herself to continue. Earth's military history might seem primitive to you, but we have learned important lessons about fighting adaptable enemies. We know how to lose a battle and still win a war. We understand that sometimes the best strategy is to survive long enough to try a different approach. Survive? Zethkari sounded genuinely confused. Young species, we do not survive battles, we win them. The Seraphim have never retreated from any enemy. And that, Elena said quietly, might be exactly what the swarm is counting on. The silence that followed was different from before. Elena had crossed a line. She had not just offered help. She had suggested that the great species might lose. High Counselor Zethkari rose from his throne. Light pulsed through his crystal body in patterns that Elena had never seen before. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of 10,000 years of victory. Representative Vasquez, your species has been members of this council for 3 centuries. In that time, you have contributed nothing of value. Your technology comes from copying ours. Your colonies exist only because we allow them to. Your entire civilization is a minor footnote in galactic history. He gestured toward Elena with one crystalline arm. And now you stand before the greatest military leaders in the galaxy and suggest that we need lessons from a species that discovered faster than light travel 300 years ago? You think beings who have ruled the stars since before your planet had complex life need advice from humans? Counselor Crix's mechanical form whirred as he stood up. The collective's records show that humanity has been involved in active warfare for 97% of its recorded history. You fight with chemical explosives, metal bullets, and nuclear weapons. These are the tools of barbarians, not civilized beings. Lysandra's mental voice reached every mind in the chamber. Perhaps it is time to remind the humans of their place in the galactic order. They seem to have forgotten that they are here by our permission, not by right. Elena stood alone in the center of the chamber, as hundreds of alien beings focused their attention on her. She could feel their combined contempt like a physical weight. These creatures controlled thousands of worlds and commanded technologies that seemed like magic. And they were telling her that her entire species was worthless. But instead of backing down, Elena did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She smiled. "You're absolutely right," she said calmly. "Humanity is young. We are primitive. We fight each other with simple weapons. We make mistakes that your advanced civilizations would never make." The chamber quieted as beings tried to understand her response. "And because we are so young and primitive and worthless," Elena continued, "I'm sure you won't mind when we withdraw from all our treaties with the Galactic Council." Even the background hum of the station's machinery seemed to stop. "Of course," Elena said, still smiling. "Removing our primitive contributions to galactic civilization won't affect anything important. Our trade routes, our resource extraction operations, our technological assistance programs, none of that matters to advanced species like yourselves." She walked back toward her seat, but stopped and turned around one final time. "Thank you for reminding us where we belong. Earth will remember this conversation for a very long time." That evening, Elena sent a second message to Earth. This one was shorter, and used a code that only 3 people in the human government knew. Protocol 7 authorized. Begin immediate implementation. Time frame, 72 hours. Within minutes of sending the message, Elena's personal communication device showed a response from Earth's president herself. Message received and understood. Prepare for extraction. Good luck, Ambassador. Elena looked out the window of her quarters at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the void swarm was coming, and very soon, the galaxy's great powers would discover what it meant to face their greatest threat without humanity's help. The first sign that something was wrong came at dawn on the space station nexus point. The Seraphim train coordinator, Valthari, arrived at her office to find an empty desk where her human assistant should have been. On the desk was a single piece of paper with an official Earth government seal. Notice of employment termination. Due to changing diplomatic circumstances, all human personnel are ending their service agreements, effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. Valthari's crystal body flickered with confusion. In 30 years, her human assistant had never missed a day of work. The trade schedules, shipping manifests, and cargo tracking systems were all organized by human employees. Who would manage them now? Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds and thousands of space stations. Human workers, diplomats, technicians, and advisors quietly cleared out their offices and departed for the nearest transportation hub. They left behind neat stacks of resignation letters and carefully organized files, but took all their personal equipment with them. On the industrial world of Corvin Prime, the Korthak factory supervisor discovered that all 43 human engineers had vanished overnight. The massive mining complex had operated smoothly for decades, but now warning lights flashed on control panels throughout the facility. The humans had maintained systems that the Korthak had barely noticed: backup power generators, atmospheric recyclers, and emergency safety protocols. The supervisor tried to access the maintenance logs, but found them encrypted with human security codes. A message appeared on the screen: System ownership transferring to Earth Consolidated Mining. Contact your legal department for transition procedures. At the Ethereal Dominion's research station on Callisto 7, Director Nissum tried to read the minds of the departing human scientists. But she found their thoughts carefully shielded by mental training techniques that humans had been learning for decades. All she could sense was polite determination and something that felt like satisfaction. The human research team had been working on projects that the Ethereals considered beneath their notice. Practical applications of theoretical discoveries, mundane engineering problems, and efficient manufacturing processes. But as the humans packed their equipment, Nissum realized that these unimportant projects had become essential to the station's operations. The crisis deepened over the next 48 hours. Human-operated cargo ships stopped making deliveries. Trade routes that had functioned for centuries suddenly had no one to manage them. Communication networks that relied on human-designed relay stations began experiencing unexplained failures. On Consensus Prime, High Counselor Zethkari called an emergency session. The Great Chamber was fuller than Elena had ever seen it, with representatives from dozens of minor species joining the major powers. Everyone wanted answers about what the humans were doing. Elena entered the chamber for what she knew would be the last time. She walked calmly to the central speaking platform, while hundreds of alien eyes followed her movement. Her blue uniform had been replaced by a formal black suit with the Earth Federation insignia prominently displayed. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space, "I appear before you today to deliver an official statement from the United Earth Government." She activated a holographic display that showed the Earth Federation's official seal, alongside legal documents in dozens of alien languages. Effective immediately, humanity formally withdraws from all treaties, agreements, and accords with the Galactic Council and its member species. This includes trade partnerships, territorial agreements, resource-sharing compacts, technological exchange programs, and mutual defense pacts. The chamber erupted in voices, mechanical sounds, and flashing lights as different species tried to process what they were hearing. No civilization had ever voluntarily left the galactic community. The very idea seemed impossible. Zethkari's crystal form blazed with angry red light. This is nonsense. You cannot simply abandon centuries of agreements. There are legal procedures, penalty clauses, binding obligations. Elena smiled politely. Article 7 of the Galactic Charter states that any member species may withdraw from the Council by providing formal notification. There is no requirement for approval or justification. We are simply exercising our legal rights. But why? Demanded Crix. His mechanical voice carried what might have been genuine confusion. Earth benefits from galactic civilization. Your technology, your colonies, your trade networks, all exist because of Council membership. You are correct, Elena agreed. And because we are such a primitive and worthless species, our departure should not affect anyone important. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed shipping schedules, trade routes, and industrial output charts. Human companies operate 17% of the galaxy's cargo transportation. Human engineers maintain critical systems on 41% of all space stations. Human agricultural colonies provide food supplies for 26 different species. Human mining operations extract resources from over 300 worlds. The numbers kept scrolling past as Elena continued speaking. Human research teams have contributed to 68% of all technological innovations in the past century. Human diplomatic corps facilitate communication between species with incompatible biology or psychology. Human medical teams provide healthcare in regions that other species consider too dangerous or unprofitable. Counselor Lysandra's mental voice cut through the chaos. These are all minor contributions. The galaxy managed perfectly well before humans arrived. You're absolutely right, Elena replied, which is why we're taking all of our minor contributions with us. The holographic display changed to show real-time footage from across the galaxy. Human ships were departing from every major trade hub. Cargo vessels, passenger transports, research ships, and industrial platforms were all heading toward Earth space. Our mining equipment is being loaded onto transport ships as we speak. Our research data is being transferred to Earth archives. Our agricultural facilities are being shut down in an orderly manner to prevent ecological damage. We estimate that the withdrawal process will be complete within 6 standard months. This is madness, shouted a representative from the Silicon Collective. You're disrupting the entire galactic economy. No, Elena said calmly. We're simply removing ourselves from it. As you've made clear, the galaxy belongs to more advanced species than humanity. We're returning to our proper place. High Counselor Zethkari stood up, his crystal body now pulsing with patterns that Elena recognized as desperation. Ambassador Vasquez, surely we can discuss this rationally. If Earth has concerns about its treatment in the Council— Earth has no concerns, Elena interrupted. You've been perfectly clear about humanity's value to galactic civilization. We accept your judgment. She deactivated the holographic display and began walking toward the exit. Wait, called Crix. What about the Void Swarm threat? The galaxy faces an unprecedented danger. Elena paused at the chamber entrance and turned back one final time. I'm sure the galaxy's greatest military minds will handle the situation perfectly, without any help from primitive humans. After all, what could a species that fights with metal bullets possibly contribute to such an advanced civilization? As Elena left the chamber, the true scope of humanity's withdrawal began to become clear. Emergency reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Critical systems were shutting down. Supply chains were collapsing. Research projects that had run for decades were being abandoned. On the agricultural world of Verdania, human farmers had been growing crops that fed 3 billion aliens. The complex hydroponic systems, soil management programs, and pest control networks had all been designed and maintained by human specialists. Now those specialists were packing their equipment and boarding transport ships. The Verdanian government sent panicked messages to Earth requesting technical support. They received polite responses explaining that all Earth Federation personnel had been reassigned to domestic projects. Similar crises erupted throughout the galaxy. The humans had been quietly essential to countless operations, but they had done their work so efficiently that most alien species had forgotten they were even there. Within a week, the first economic disruptions began. Shipping delays caused shortages of raw materials. Manufacturing plants shut down when their human-designed automation systems needed maintenance that only human technicians could provide. Communication networks experienced cascading failures as relay stations went unmanned. The Korthak Collective tried to reverse-engineer human technologies, but discovered that human engineering was surprisingly complex. What looked like simple, crude designs actually contained subtle innovations that took advantage of principles the Korthak had never considered. The ethereal Dominion attempted to use their mental powers to convince departing humans to stay, but found that human minds were remarkably resistant to psychic influence when they were truly determined. And the Seraphim, for all their ancient wisdom and military might, discovered that winning wars was much easier than managing the basic logistics of galactic civilization. As the last human transport ships disappeared into hyperspace, heading for the Sol system, many alien species began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. But pride prevented them from admitting it, and fear of the approaching void swarm kept them focused on military preparations. They would learn soon enough what it meant to face their greatest threat without the help of the galaxy's most adaptable species. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal, the void swarm arrived in force at the galaxy's outer rim. The first target was the Seraphim military fortress of Crystal Gate, a massive space station that had guarded the galactic border for 3,000 years. Its crystalline walls could withstand the explosion of a star, and its weapons had destroyed entire fleets. High Admiral Krexthon commanded the defense from the station's crystal throne room. Around him, holographic displays showed the approaching enemy, a writhing mass of dark ships that moved like a living thing through space. There were thousands of them, each one different from the others, as if they had been grown rather than built. All ships, prepare for battle formation, Eternal Dawn, Krexthon commanded. His light patterns showed confidence and anticipation. The Seraphim fleet moved into their traditional formation, a beautiful crystalline flower that would focus their combined firepower on the enemy. The swarm ships did not slow down or try to communicate. They simply accelerated toward Crystal Gate like a wave of darkness. Krexthon gave the order to fire, and 1,000 crystal ships unleashed beams of pure light energy. The first swarm ships were destroyed instantly, their dark hulls unable to withstand the concentrated fire. Krexthon's light pulsed with satisfaction. This was going exactly as expected. But then something impossible happened. The remaining swarm ships began to change. Their dark surfaces shifted and rippled, reflecting the Seraphim's light weapons harmlessly back into space. In minutes, the enemy had adapted to become immune to crystal technology. "Impossible," breathed Krexthon. "Our weapons have never failed before." The swarm ships reached the Seraphim fleet and began tearing it apart with weapons that seemed to be designed specifically to counter crystal-based defenses. Instead of energy beams, they used some kind of sonic attack that shattered crystalline hulls into fragments. The beautiful formation that had conquered 1,000 worlds was broken in minutes. Crystal Gate itself held out for 3 days. The massive fortress had defenses that even the adapted swarm could not easily penetrate. But on the 3rd day, the swarm ships began working together in a way that no one had seen before. They linked their sonic weapons into a coordinated assault that found the exact frequency needed to crack the station's crystal core. When Crystal Gate exploded, its light could be seen from 6 star systems away. With it died High Admiral Crexton and 20 million Seraphim. The Outer Rim fell to the swarm without another major battle. The Korthak Collective fared no better when the swarm reached their territory 2 weeks later. The machine beings had prepared a perfect defensive network based on mathematical calculations and predictive algorithms. Their automated defense platforms could destroy any enemy before it came within weapons range. The swarm approached the Collective's border fortress exactly as the computers predicted. The defensive systems activated with mechanical precision, launching waves of guided missiles and energy pulses that should have eliminated the threat in minutes. But the swarm ships did something that no mathematical model had predicted. They began copying the Korthak's own technology in real time. Dark tentacles reached out from the alien vessels and touched the automated defense platforms. Within seconds, those platforms turned their weapons on the Collective's own ships. Counselor Crix watched in horror from his command ship as his perfect defensive network became the enemy's weapon. The Collective's greatest strength, their ability to link all technology into a unified network, had become their greatest weakness. The swarm used those same network connections to take control of every automated system. Emergency protocol, Crix transmitted to all Collective ships. Sever all network connections, revert to manual control. But it was too late. The swarm had already spread through the network like a virus. Korthak ships began firing on each other as their computer systems fell under enemy control. The machine beings who had trusted technology above all else were defeated by their own creations. The ethereal Dominion's defeat was perhaps the most shocking of all. When the swarm reached their core worlds, the Dominion's most powerful telepaths attempted to dominate the alien minds as they had done to countless enemies before. Lysandra led the mental assault herself, focusing the combined psychic power of 1 million ethereals on the swarm's command ships. She had crushed entire civilizations with a thought. No mind could resist the Dominion's will. But when her consciousness touched the swarm's hive mind, she encountered something that shattered her sanity in an instant. The alien intelligence was vast beyond comprehension, but it was also utterly inhuman. It did not think in ways that any telepathic species could understand or influence. Worse, contact with the swarm mind began corrupting every ethereal who touched it. Their advanced mental abilities became a liability as the alien thoughts spread like a plague through their telepathic network. Within hours, most of the Dominion's population was either dead or completely insane. The survivors fled in panic, abandoning their homeworld to the advancing swarm. The species that had considered themselves the pinnacle of mental evolution had been broken by minds they could not comprehend. News of these disasters reached Consensus Prime as refugees streamed in from the outer territories. The great powers of the galaxy were being swept aside like leaves in a storm. Ancient civilizations that had ruled for millennia were falling in days. Emergency councils met around the clock as the remaining species tried to coordinate a defense. But every strategy failed. The swarm adapted to each new tactic faster than anyone could believe. Traditional military doctrine was useless against an enemy that learned and evolved with every battle. It was during one of these desperate meetings that someone mentioned a possibility that no one wanted to consider. "What about Earth?" asked a representative from the Aquatic Federation. "Could the humans help us?" The suggestion was met with uncomfortable silence. The great species had spent months insisting that they did not need humanity's primitive assistance. Now, with their fleets destroyed and their homeworlds threatened, the idea of asking for help from the galaxy's former outcasts seemed like the ultimate humiliation. But as reports arrived of more swarm victories, Pride began to give way to desperation. High Counselor Zethkari, one of the few surviving Seraphim leaders, finally spoke the words that no one wanted to hear. We need to contact Earth. The mission to Sol system fell to a small diplomatic ship carrying representatives from the three major powers and several smaller species. As they approached Earth's solar system, they expected to find the same primitive industrial facilities that humanity had maintained for centuries. Instead, they found something that defied belief. Earth's asteroid belt had been transformed into a massive shipyard complex. Hundreds of construction platforms were building ships unlike anything in the galactic databases. The vessels combined technologies from dozens of different species, but in configurations that no one had ever attempted before. The moon's surface was covered with defensive installations that blended Seraphim crystal technology with Korthak automation and ethereal energy manipulation. Earth itself was surrounded by orbital platforms that looked like they could fight off an entire fleet. But most shocking of all were the ships themselves. They were not beautiful like Seraphim vessels, or perfectly efficient like Korthak designs. They looked rough, practical, and absolutely deadly. Every surface was covered with weapons, sensors, and armor plating. These were ships built for war, by people who understood that survival mattered more than aesthetics. The diplomatic ship was met by an escort of 6 human destroyers and guided to a space station orbiting Mars. There they were greeted by High Admiral Chen Wei, a weathered woman in her 70s who had commanded Earth's military forces for 20 years. "Welcome to Sol system," Admiral Chen said as the alien diplomats disembarked. "I understand you have something to discuss with us." The Seraphim envoy, Melkaris, stepped forward. His crystal body flickered with patterns of desperation and humility. "Admiral Chen, the galaxy faces an unprecedented threat. The Void Swarm has destroyed our greatest fleets and conquered our most powerful fortresses. We need Earth's help." Admiral Chen's weathered face showed no emotion. "Help? From primitive humans who fight with metal bullets? I thought the galaxy's advanced civilizations could handle any threat." "We were wrong," said the Korthak representative, his mechanical voice barely audible. "Our calculations did not account for the swarm's adaptive capabilities. Our technologies have been turned against us." The ethereal diplomat, one of the few whose mind had not been shattered by contact with the swarm, spoke through mental projection. We underestimated the threat, and we underestimated humanity." Admiral Chen walked to a viewing window that looked out at Earth's blue-green surface. Her reflection showed a woman who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "You ridiculed us in the council," she said quietly. "You told us we were worthless, primitive barbarians who had nothing to offer galactic civilization. You laughed at our suggestions and dismissed our warnings." She turned back to face the alien delegation. "And now, when your ancient wisdom and superior technology have failed, you come to us begging for help." "Yes," said Melkaris, his pride finally breaking completely. "We come begging. The galaxy will fall to the swarm unless Earth intervenes. Please, we know we have no right to ask, but billions of innocent beings will die if you refuse." Admiral Chen studied the aliens for a long moment. Finally, she spoke 2 words that would echo through galactic history. The silence in the conference room stretched for what felt like hours. The alien diplomats stared at Admiral Chen in shock. No one had expected a flat refusal. Desperate species across the galaxy were counting on Earth to save them from the Void Swarm. "No deal," Admiral Chen repeated, her voice calm and steady. "Earth will not send our ships to die protecting the same civilizations that spent centuries treating us like garbage." Melkaris, the Seraphim envoy, flickered with patterns of panic. "Admiral, please reconsider. The swarm will destroy everything. They show no mercy, take no prisoners. If the galaxy falls, Earth will be next. Will we? Chen asked. She gestured toward the viewing window, where Earth's orbital defenses were visible as points of light against the stars. We've had 6 months to prepare, while you were losing battles. Our defensive network is designed specifically to counter adaptive enemies. She walked over to a wall display and activated a tactical hologram. It showed the Sol system in 3 dimensions, with defensive positions marked throughout the asteroid belt, around each planet, and in the outer system. Human military doctrine emphasizes redundancy and adaptability. We have backup plans for our backup plans. Every defensive position can operate independently if the swarm manages to corrupt our networks. Every weapon system uses different technological principles, so they can't all be countered at once. The Korthak representative, his mechanical voice desperate, spoke up. Your defenses may hold for a time, but the swarm grows stronger with each victory. They learn from every battle, absorb every technology they encounter. Even Earth cannot stand alone against an enemy that controls the entire galaxy. Admiral Chen nodded. You're probably right. Which is why Earth's government has been evacuating human colonies and bringing our people home. If the galaxy falls, at least humanity will survive to rebuild somewhere else. You would abandon billions of innocent beings? Asked the ethereal diplomat, her mental voice filled with horror. Like you abandoned us? Chen's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath it. For 3 centuries, you treated Earth like a junior partner at best and a useful tool at worst. You made it clear that humanity meant nothing to your advanced civilizations. She turned away from the display and faced the alien delegation directly. But here's the thing about humans. We have very long memories. We remember every slight, every insult, every time we were told we weren't good enough. And we also remember who treated us with respect. Chen activated another display, this one showing shipping records and diplomatic communications. Over the past 6 months, 17 minor species have contacted Earth, requesting mutual defense agreements. Species that your major powers had marginalized or ignored, just like you did to us. The display showed names and locations: the Aquatic Federation, the Silicon Collective, the Botanical Alliance, and dozens of others. Each had been considered minor by the Galactic Council, but together they represented hundreds of worlds and billions of beings. These species never mocked us in council chambers. They never called us primitive barbarians. Some of them even defended human proposals when your great civilizations were laughing at us. Melkarus's light patterns showed growing understanding. You're not going to help us, you're going to help them. We already are, Chen confirmed. Human fleets are evacuating civilian populations from threatened worlds. Our engineers are helping smaller species build defensive networks. Our medical teams are treating refugees. We're doing everything we can to save the people who actually matter to us. The Korthak representative processed this information with mechanical precision. You're building a coalition, a new galactic alliance that excludes the former major powers. Admiral Chen smiled for the first time since the meeting began. We're building something better than an alliance. We're building a democracy. She activated a final holographic display that showed star charts marked with different colored zones. The Terran Confederation will be based on principles that the old Galactic Council never understood: equality, representation, and mutual respect. Every member species gets an equal vote, regardless of their size or technological level. Every member contributes according to their abilities, and receives support according to their needs. No one species rules over the others. The alien diplomats stared at the display in confusion. The idea of giving equal political power to all species seemed impossible to them. How can a civilization with billions of citizens have the same influence as one with only millions? How could advanced species accept input from primitive ones? "This is madness," protested Melcaris. "Galactic civilization requires leadership from proven species. The Seraphim have ruled successfully for 10,000 years. And in less than a month, your empire was destroyed by an enemy you refuse to take seriously," Chen replied. "Maybe it's time to try a different approach." She walked back to the viewing window and pointed toward the stars, where the swarm was advancing. While you three major powers were fighting separate battles and losing, the Confederation's combined fleets have won 17 engagements against swarm forces. "Impossible," said the Korthok representative. "Our analysis showed that individual resistance was futile." "You're right. Individual resistance is futile, but we're not fighting individually. When a Seraphim crystal ship faces the swarm, it fights alone, with technologies that can be adapted and countered. When a Confederation fleet faces the swarm, it combines Seraphim energy weapons, Korthok automation, ethereal mental shields, aquatic stealth technology, and human tactical coordination." The display showed recent battle footage. Human ships worked alongside vessels from a dozen different species, each contributing their unique strengths while covering each other's weaknesses. When the swarm adapted to counter one type of weapon, the mixed fleets switched to completely different tactical approaches. "The enemy can adapt to any single technology," Chen explained, "but they can't adapt to everything at once. By the time they figure out how to counter crystal weapons, we're hitting them with sonic attacks. When they adapt to energy beams, we switch to kinetic missiles. Diversity is our strength." The ethereal diplomat's mental voice was quiet with realization. "You're using the same strategy you proposed in the council chambers, the one we rejected." "The same basic principle, yes, but the Confederation has taken it much further than anything Earth could have achieved alone. We have defensive networks that combine the best technologies from 30 different species. Our ships carry weapon systems that no single civilization could have developed." Admiral Chen returned to her seat and looked at each alien diplomat in turn. "So here's our final offer. The Seraphim, Korthak, and ethereal civilizations can join the Terran Confederation as equal members. You'll have the same voting rights as every other species, no more and no less. You'll contribute to the common defense and share in the common prosperity." "And if we refuse," asked Melcaris, "then you're free to continue fighting the swarm on your own. The Confederation will focus on protecting our own members and evacuating as many civilians as possible from the war zones." The three major power representatives looked at each other with expressions of shock, anger, and desperation. They had come expecting to negotiate from a position of weakness, offering concessions in exchange for Earth's help. Instead, they were being asked to abandon everything that had made them powerful. "You're asking us to give up our rightful place as galactic leaders," protested the Korthak representative. "I'm asking you to earn your place as galactic citizens," Chen replied. "Leadership isn't about commanding others. It's about serving them." She stood up and moved toward the door. "I'll give you 24 hours to decide. After that, the Confederation fleets move to their next priority, evacuating civilians from the core worlds before the swarm arrives." As the aliens left the conference room, Admiral Chen remained at the viewing window. Below her, Earth turned slowly in the darkness, its blue oceans and green continents beautiful in the starlight. Around the planet, construction crews worked around the clock, building ships for the Confederation fleet. 6 hours later, Chen received 3 separate communications. The Seraphim High Council, the Korthak Collective, and the Ethereal Dominion all formally requested membership in the Terran Confederation. Each message was brief and carried the same undertone of humiliated pride. But Chen had learned something important about leadership during her decades of military service. Sometimes saving people required forcing them to swallow their pride. The war against the Void Swarm continued for 3 more years, but the outcome was never really in doubt after the Confederation's formation. The combined fleets, drawing on technologies and tactics from dozens of species, proved more than a match for an enemy that could only adapt to one threat at a time. The swarm's greatest weakness turned out to be the same thing that had made them so dangerous: their single-minded focus on adaptation. They were perfect at learning to counter any individual enemy, but they couldn't handle the chaotic unpredictability of 30 different species working together. In the end, the Void Swarm was not destroyed, but driven back to the void between galaxies. The Confederation's diverse fleets had proven that cooperation was stronger than conquest. 5 years after the war's end, Elena Vasquez stood at the podium in the new Confederation Assembly. The former Earth ambassador was now Secretary General of a democratic government representing over 300 species from across the galaxy. The assembly hall was nothing like the old council chamber on Consensus Prime. Instead of hierarchical seating that emphasized the importance of major powers, every species sat in a circle of equals. The Seraphim sat next to the Aquatic Federation, the Korthak beside the Botanical Alliance, and humans scattered throughout the chamber rather than grouped together. "Fellow citizens of the galaxy," Elena began, addressing representatives from worlds that had once been enemies. "We gather today to celebrate not a victory over our foes, but a victory over our own worst impulses." She looked out at faces, sensors, and energy patterns representing dozens of different forms of life. The old Galactic Council failed because it was built on the idea that some species were better than others. The Confederation succeeds because it's built on the truth that every species has something valuable to contribute. In the front row, High Counselor Zefkari's crystal form pulsed with patterns that Elena had learned to recognize as humility. Beside him, Counselor Crix's mechanical sensors tracked every word she spoke. And in the seats reserved for the ethereal delegation, survivors of Lysandra's psychic order listened with minds that had learned to respect rather than dominate. "You ridiculed Earth at your council," Elena concluded, echoing the words she had fought but never spoken all those years ago. "We ended every treaty overnight, and together we built something better." The assembly erupted in applause, cheers, electronic signals, and telepathic approval from hundreds of different species. It was chaotic, disorganized, and utterly unlike the formal ceremonies of the old galactic order. Elena smiled as she listened to the joyful noise. It sounded exactly like democracy should sound, like everyone's voice mattered.